Good evening, friends, and welcome to another edition of Crime Time with DutyRon. Guys and girls, you know the drill. I'm a retired New York City police detective, and if you like all things true crime related from the police detective's perspective, please consider hitting that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you'll get all things DutyRon and Ed Wallace when we go live or upload another video. Hey, and tonight we have a super show for you. I have a cell and data expert who's going to come on with us. I have another special guest. I won't name him or her until they appear. We're going to be speaking on Bryan Kohberger and Alex Murdoch. The cell phone data and the vehicle data, these are very important things. As we see in one case, a trial is in full swing and it's wrapping up with the Alex Murdoch trial. And we're going to see in the future Bryan Kohberger be brought into a courtroom and evidence be presented. But as I always like to do, I like to give you guys the educational value from the professionals. And when Ed and I have not a lot of knowledge in certain particular areas, we bring the experts in, and we have an expert here for you tonight. But before we get into it, I want to say a special thank you to you, the Patreon supporters, the channel members, the folks who positively engage in all things that we speak about. You guys are what makes this a great place. The replay viewers, you guys that are moderating, you do such a great job in engaging with not just me and Ed, you're engaging with our community. And that's what I love about Crime Time with DutyRon. So I tip my cap. I don't have a cap on tonight, but I tip my cap to each and every one of you. And thank you so much for always hanging out with us and asking the tough questions. Hey, I asked you guys to send in questions on tonight's show. I got 2 freaking pages of questions. We're going to ask our expert guest these questions, and we're going to go to the live chat towards the end of the show, and we're going to engage with the live chat to have you ask your questions as it relates to Bryan Kohberger and the Murdoch case. Cell phone data, computer data, vehicle data. These are all things that come into play in these cases, and we've got the experts here for you. Before we get into it, I want to show this little piece. This is talking about Bluetooth speakers and so forth. So I want you guys to just listen in on this older piece of media, but it is related to what we're going to talk about.
Kaylee's room, most likely by the killer, and closed into that room and discovered there by the police. So our source, who has intimate knowledge of this investigation, told us about this Bluetooth speaker. And if you do some of the digital math, if Bryan Kohberger took his phone into that house, and he very well may have, if he's the killer, he may have thought himself so darn clever that just putting it on airplane mode would mask everything, shut off every single digital piece of footprint. It's on airplane mode. Nobody can see me now. Unless, of course, it reached out to a Bluetooth device. If there were a Bluetooth device nearby, which now we know there was. So I've got a lot of reporting on that, and I've got an expert who's going to walk you through all the steps of why that may or may not work. But the key here is may. It just may. So that's just one more critical piece of a prosecution's case. Because if you lose one and you only have one, you may lose it all. Bloody glove. If it don't fit, you must acquit. Ugh. All sorts of stuff like that happens in a case. The most critical piece of evidence can be denigrated, and a jury can be convinced, maybe not reasonably, but they can be convinced that it's not good evidence. So the more the merrier, you might say. A couple of things that you should know as well. There's something called a handshake that devices actually give out. And when you put your device on airplane mode, it doesn't mean you can't connect to Bluetooth. You're not going to reach out to the Wi-Fi. You're not going to reach out to the cell towers, but you can reach out to Bluetooth, and you might not even know it's happening. So if Kohberger were driving around in that Elantra, switching it to airplane mode as he got out of Pullman, and felt as though it was still in airplane mode as he pulled into Moscow, and still in airplane mode, perhaps in his hip pocket as he walked into that house, we got news for you. There's action. Those things actually don't stay dormant. And here's something critical. early in this investigation, in the first, week plus, when we were still getting public news conferences, the Northwest Public Broadcasting reporter named Lauren Patterson was sitting in the press corps, and she asked a question of the authorities who were conducting the news conference. And man, oh man, did that girl have insight to ask a clever question. Have a look.
Curious if the Wi-Fi hotspot has been tapped at all. It's possible if the suspect had their phone on them, it may have pinged off the Wi-Fi in the residence. Has that been checked on at all?
As I stated, our investigation is looking at every avenue of every piece of evidence that we can.
So there you have it. I wanted to just show that because that was just a small aspect of what we're going to be speaking about tonight. We're all obviously going to be speaking about cell tower, geofencing, triangulation of cell signals. But before we do that, I want to introduce you to my first guest. Her name is Tiffany Lenart. She is the director of digital forensics, the digital forensics team in the data and technology practice at Ankara Consulting. I hope I said that right. I think I messed it up. Tiffany spent over a decade in law enforcement. She served as a federal air marshal and detective. In her role as detective, Tiffany was on the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force for 8 years. She investigated cyber-based and financial crimes. She's also an International Association of Certified Computer Investigative Specialists. She's certified in the forensic computer as a forensic computer examiner. She holds a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and a master's degree in professional security studies with a concentration in both cyber and national security. Tiffany, thank you so much for joining Crime Time with DutyRon tonight. Our audience is just can't wait to get to questions with you later on. I just wanted to get your take on this piece that I just played about the Bluetooth and the handshake and so forth.
I think that it's weighing a lot, that just specific piece on the potential Bluetooth handshake. Like, could it be there? Yes. Do we know yet? No. Will we know until trial? Probably not. I, as an investigator, wouldn't want any of my evidence that I'm going to be using in trial getting out. The prosecutor wouldn't want that. The digital math thing was a little weird for me because as a forensic examiner, I've never heard anybody refer to it as digital math. Right. And the other thing is, I think most people who frequently use their phone, have used their phone in airplane mode on airplanes, know you can connect to a Wi-Fi network while your phone is in airplane mode. So that was another inconsistency in that type of reporting.
Yeah. Hey, and I wanted to also get from you, if you could, just if you could walk our audience through what, brought you to, computer forensics and cell data and all of this stuff. I read your extensive profile here, and you've got such a great background in this stuff. What drew you to this field of work?
When I became a detective, because of my degree in cybersecurity, I asked to go to the Computer Analysis and Technology Unit. At the time, I was at the New Jersey Division of Criminal Justice, and they honored my wishes. And I was put on the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, which I will forever say is made up of the best detectives there are across the United States and our partners in other countries. A lot of training is available to detectives that serve in those roles. And a lot of it is highly technical training because we're dealing with media all the time, computers, cell phones, people who prey on children, who download child sexual abuse imagery, all of these things, and have a technical background. So all of these detectives have the opportunity to go to different trainings. And I was able to go to a ton of training that my task force provided.
Right. And you got to see both sides of the fence, not only the investigatory side, but the prosecutorial side with working in the prosecutor's office. So those are important things for people to get a great grasp on here, is that not only does Tiffany know about what needs to be done to get the perpetrator, to get the bad guys, but also to successfully prosecute them. I wanted to start off with you, but first I want to introduce also our special guest. He's a retired NYPD detective sergeant. He has a great YouTube show and podcast, Police Off the Cuff. He's been covering the Murdoch case as well. He's got many videos, him and Phil, but he also is covering extensively the Bryan Kohberger case. Bill, thank you so much for joining Crime Time with DutyRon tonight. It's always great to have you.
It's great to be here and great to meet Tiffany Lenart. I hope I pronounced your last name correctly.
No one can.
Well, we do the best that we can. But Tiffany, again, I wanted to start with, Kohberger. We saw the probable cause affidavit come out shortly after he was extradited from Pennsylvania, Monroe County, across back into Latah County. And within that probable cause affidavit, there was extensive conversation about his AT&T cell phone service, which he signed up for in June of 2022. They went all the way back to June when the account started, which was smart. But if you could walk the audience through what goes on in a cell dump where you're going after all of the data on a particular person's phone, what they can get, what they can't get, and then we'll get into geofencing after that.
So in this instance, at the point where they're serving an order, a court order or subpoena, a warrant likely because they want to get content from the service provider for all of these tower pings, the phone is not in hand yet. We have to remember, and I think it's so important because a lot of people might not understand that, the police don't have access to Kohberger's phone at this point. They only know the records that are provided from the phone company, not the actual data that's on his phone. But those phone company records, they can then tell you where a phone has been, what towers it's pinged off of, and then that goes into the geofencing warrant where you're getting a location. So we know that this phone has been in this area. And that's the important thing here, which a lot of experts that are quoted in articles for this case are saying, well, it doesn't put him in the house. No, this piece of evidence does not put him necessarily in the house, but it puts him in the general vicinity. So we know that prior to the evening of the murders, 12 times he was in the location in a reasonable distance to this crime scene.
Right. Yeah. And we see that all over the probable cause affidavit, which I'm going to add onto the screen here. On page 12 of this document, the lead detective says that on December 23rd, 2022, I applied and was granted a search warrant for historical phone records between November 12th, 2022 at 12 a.m. and November 14th at 12 a.m. for the 8458 phone held by the phone provider AT&T, approximately 24 hours preceding the following the times of the homicides. On December 23rd, pursuant to the search warrant, I received the records for the said phone from AT&T. And then the records indicate that the phone was subscribed to Bryan Kohberger at his address in Pennsylvania. I'm not going to go on and read all this stuff, but I wanted to go to where he mentions here that he consults with an FBI special agent that is certified as a member of the Cellular Analysis Survey Team, the CAST team. We hear a lot about this CAST team. Do you have any knowledge of what they do and what services they provide for locals, Tiff?
So I was detached for about a year to the Regional Forensic Laboratory in New Jersey, which is run by the FBI. And the FBI has an amazing program, and every examiner that walks through their door, some of them FBI agents, others are partners from local law enforcement, gets put through a rigorous training program. And then you might have a specialization later on. There are guys who specialize in audio, in decrypting devices, in video enhancement. All of these people have years and years of experience working in a particular specialty, and then they go on to these advanced units. So this is a team who knows the ins and outs of analyzing this type of cell phone data, of plotting it out for investigators, and weighed in heavily in assisting on this case.
Right. Now, you said you had an opportunity to look over the probable cause affidavit, and as it relates to the cell phone data, anything stick out to you that was mentioned in probable cause affidavit? And again, you mentioned right up front, and Bill and I have been saying this till we turn blue in the face. This is just a slither of information that they have in their war chest, so to speak. There's so much more data, and I know I hear Bill and Phil, myself and Ed Wallace, we talk about this all the time. That's just enough to get that person into custody and get those arrest warrants signed off by the judge, get him in custody, and now his defense team is getting all of the discovery as they see fit. But anything stand out to you in the probable cause affidavit in your readings, Tiff?
So I have like a little timeline I made of what I think is important. And I think what's important to note is that there's layers of tech evidence here. There's other electronic evidence along with those cell phone records that put him in the area that give corroboration to other aspects that might not be technically related in this case. The first being the video footage of the car, which is referred to as the suspect vehicle in the affidavit. They know from video surveillance that a car matching the suspect vehicle description was in that area between 3:29 and 4:20 is our last time we're seeing it on video surveillance that's available to the police at the time. They also have an audio recording from a nearby neighbor's security camera that has a dog barking, and that's at 4:17 a.m. So still in that time frame when the car is in the neighborhood. They also claim that they heard muffled in that same video, a whimper and a thud. That's open to interpretation. Someone might hear one thing at trial. We'll see what the jury thinks if that is played at the trial. What becomes important about that little piece of evidence there where it's, that audio of a dog barking and everyone's like, oh, there's a million reasons why the dog could be barking. There is a dog in the crime scene. One of, I believe it was Kaylee's dog.
Yes.
Is in the house. So, okay, we know that this dog, it could very well be, we can't analyze the bark, but it may very well have been her dog that's barking around the time this car is in the area, and then they're soon after murdered in this house. Could be very important. We also know that at 4 a.m., there's a DoorDash order that comes out of the house, that someone's on TikTok at 4:12. So all around this time frame, we have an idea of what the victims are doing, and we know this car is in the area. And this car passes by a few times during that time period, which in the probable cause affidavit, they refer to the area as not a high traffic area. Not at that time, generally not a high traffic area. So it's unusual. And then we go to what we know from the records that they received for Kohberger's phone. It goes off the network at 2:47 a.m. So at 2:47 a.m., his phone goes off the network. He's in Pullum. That's about, I think it's 8.62, maybe off by a little there, miles, but less than 9 miles from our crime scene. So reasonably, if he's in Pullum at 2:47, by 3:29, he can be in the area. So we're taking that data and we're like, okay, we're putting these things together. And it also shows that he either could have had no cell service. It could have been in airplane mode. The phone could have been powered off. And I did read an article somewhere that said, well, we can't, they don't know that phone was powered off. And that's 100% correct. They don't know if it was manually powered off at that time, at the time that they're writing this warrant, because they don't have his phone yet. Once they get that phone in hand, which they don't have until they actually put the handcuffs on him, then they will know powering events. Once the data is downloaded, extracted from his actual cell phone, and then put through forensic software, there's so many more results and so much more data sets that they have to go through that can tell us more information about where that phone was that night.
Absolutely. Hey, I have, and I know you still have more, so I'd save it. We want to hear the rest of, if you do have more about this, but I wanted to bring onto the screen here in the probable cause affidavit. I believe this is page, 14 of 18. In the highlighted, stuff that I have highlighted here. Okay. Further review indicates that the 8458 phone utilized cellular resources. When they mention the cellular resources, they say on November 13th, 2022, that are consistent with the 845 phone leaving the area of the Kohberger residence. That's in Pullman. And then approximately 9 a.m. traveling to Moscow, Idaho. Specifically, the 8458 phone utilizes cellular resources that would provide coverage to the King Road residents. What do they mean by that statement specifically, Tiffany?
So cellular resources that would provide coverage to the King Road residents could mean that it's, and I don't think it's referring to Wi-Fi because again, they don't have his phone yet. It's back in that service area. So whatever tower is servicing that location right around the residence, his phone is pinging off that tower again.
So cellular resources is referring to the cell towers that cover within the crime scene at the King Road.
It's vague and open to interpretation by the person who wrote it, but that is the most likely explanation because we don't know yet if he's, if his phone is scanning for Wi-Fi, if he was ever attached to Wi-Fi at the residence. We don't have his phone at this point where this probable cause affidavit is written.
Bill, I know you're ready to chomp at the bit here because we've kept you quiet for a little while, but what do you got on this, Bill?
Well, just the fact that when we talk about the behavior of someone that is a murderer, in this case, a mass murderer, and we still don't know for sure if Bryan Kohberger was perhaps a serial killer. They're still out. The jury's out with that as far as them investigating all potential murders that he could have committed. However, the behavior of a killer going back to the crime scene to view his handiwork or to view what's going on at 0900 hours and the cell phone, he now feels comfortable enough to turn it back on and it hits these cell towers and it's putting him at the scene. All of this stuff, then when we hear a lot of people in the real crime community referring to, oh, this is all circumstantial. Circumstantial evidence is very, very, very powerful evidence when it's piled up on top of each other. And that is the case. And we probably only know right now about, even with Tiffany here tonight, we're learning things that I didn't know before, at least the technical aspect of it. And I think they have only let go of maybe 10% of the evidence that they have. And I've said it on numerous shows. If his DNA blood evidence is in that crime scene, it's all over.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's the thing, is that everyone gets so worked up with the probable cause affidavit and where is the rest of it? And we have to kind of keep reminding everybody that, like you said, it's probably less than 10% of what they have in their case file. And Phil, your partner, says it great. We don't have access to that. The media doesn't have access to that. These sources, these alleged sources that they keep using for information. And, Ed and I have spoken loud and clear about this. If these sources are either active or retired law enforcement, they should be found and punished.
Ron, shame on them. You're right. I agree. Shame on them that they're releasing this info, and probably to other FBI agents, active FBI agents, the people that have the inside view. They're releasing the information they know from working on the investigation to retired FBI agents and other law enforcement people that are talking heads for the media. And it's wrong. It's totally can hurt the case, and it's ridiculously wrong.
I think, too, what everyone is forgetting is that those handcuffs go on. The investigation isn't done. It's not, we're going to put a bow on this and we're going to present what we have to trial. It goes on. And a lot of times the records from internet service providers and different kind of tech companies like OnStar, which we'll talk about in Murdaugh, it can take a long time to get those records back, months, if not even longer than that. So the whole investigation, it's not done. It's ongoing.
Yeah. And us here, compiled here, the three of us, we are in this to serve justice. It's not just about a summary arrest, as Tiffany said. It's about making that arrest, getting that indictment, and getting a successful prosecution where you have a jury of his peers say he's either guilty or not guilty. And if you have any white noise that's in between being thrown out, whether it's the media, whether it's jagaloons that are just throwing up podcasts and trying to call and interview witnesses and get a hold of people that live in the neighborhood or that live next door to these people, that stuff is just a defense attorney's dream to hear and see this stuff, because it gives them something to have a diversion with when it comes to trying to prosecute, trying to stop the prosecution from having a successful prosecution. And Joe Murray comes on all the time with us, and we haven't had him on. He's a criminal defense attorney, very busy guy, but he always says silence is golden. He said, I always tell my clients, the less that you say, the better off you're going to be. And in these cases here with, Banfield and some of these other news outlets that are just coming up with this stuff just for entertainment purposes, it doesn't help to serve justice. And it just gets me sick, and it gets me all.
Ron, in this case, I think the police, the Moscow police, the FBI, the Idaho State Police, I think they've done a really good job with keeping things quiet and not releasing things that could hurt the case. Again, they were criticized in the very beginning of not being transparent. If you look back on this case, the arrest was made on December 30th and the murder occurred on November 13th. The media was going crazy that in 4 weeks or 6 weeks, there was no arrest. Like, that was unheard of, that this couldn't happen. Why is there no arrest? They're incompetent. Are they going to bring in the FBI, take over? Remember all of the noise that was coming out of the media? Then the arrest is made, and all of a sudden they're like, well, okay, we'll accept it. Like it was a race to make the arrest. No, what you want is a good arrest that's going to stand up in court, not an arrest that's going to fall apart and you just did it to satisfy the public or the media. That's not who you're working for. You're working for the 4 people that were murdered.
Right. And you know what? I'm all for the freedom of the press and freedom of speech. Educate your audience. Talk to them about what can possibly be happening, but don't try to muddy the waters with bringing in leaked sources close to the investigation. When you hear words like that, for us who are in it for the right reasons, it makes my blood boil. It really does. To break this up a little bit, I want to play a little piece from the probable cause affidavit coverage on Law and Crime Network. Our good friend Jesse Weber, he reports great, and he's got one of my really great guys that I follow all the time. He has some great guests on there, but I want to play this because they talk about the vehicles, because I want to get into the vehicles with you, Tiff, next. So this is Joseph Scott Morgan talking about the vehicle being a rolling crime scene. Let's just let this play.
Will be the police's job on the case.
Well, at that point in time, you want to keep him, secured. Obviously, that's going to be part and parcel of this. And I would imagine if they haven't done it already, they may have done this in Pennsylvania. They are going to request from him some type of biological sample. And generally, that's going to consist of them doing a buccal mucosal swab or a cheek scraping. Some people refer to it as that, to collect it from the specific source. And so they're going to go back as a confirmatory at that point in time to, kind of shore things up. Here's one more piece to this that we have to keep in mind. There's a whole bounty of evidence that has yet to come forward. And, one of the things I'm very interested in as a forensic science guy is that car. Because in my opinion, that car did not make it back to Idaho. More than likely, either working with Pennsylvania State Police or the FBI, that vehicle would have gone or has gone to an evidence processing location that has a garage, Jesse. And right now, they are taking this thing apart from stem to stern. Trust me on this. And they are going through that car, because I have contended all along that this car, obviously it's going to have Kohberger's DNA in it. You would expect that to be there. But if they get in that car and they find any DNA that's associated with these poor kids that were slaughtered in that house, this is important. My contention has been is that car is a rolling crime scene in and of itself. And it has to be handled with kid gloves at this point.
So there you have it. I love that terminology that he used, because when we had our NYPD auto crime expert on, Tiffany, he mentioned that video that we just saw, and it was just a little snippet that I played. But when he was stopped in Indiana 2 times, one of the 2 times we got a good look into the vehicle, and there is a Apple plug going from an Apple phone straight into the USB port in that Hyundai Elantra. Now it's a 2015, and we know that it's not a souped up version. It's not a limited. It's a regular Elantra. So it may not have an infotainment system, but I wanted you to talk about, I mean, we know that most vehicles, the newer versions, have that black box, so to speak, where it gives you diagnostic data, whether the car's in drive. We saw that in Murdoch. They talked about it just the other day. Can you talk a little bit about this 2015 Elantra and the vehicle without the phone that was plugged into that vehicle?
So I'm not particularly familiar with that model of car, but from that video of the car, it doesn't appear like it has an onboard navigation system. So the USB being plugged in is probably going to be purely for charging purposes if you don't have that onboard nav. If he did have onboard, infotainment navigation system, then you're going to get a lot of records from there. You might have just what apps he's using on his phone, if he paired his phone with that, which is another reason, most examiners will tell people when you use a rental car, don't ever pair your phone with the rental car, because your data from your phone, whatever you allow that car to access, can stay in that infotainment system that's in that car.
Right.
So I think in this case, that's not going to be something that we're going to have available if there isn't one in that car. And it didn't look like from their photo that there was.
Right. It does have blue link and Bluetooth. So all Hyundai's 2013 above have this blue link service. So if you get stuck, you can press a button on the radio and it could connect you with. So there is connectivity service. It has that little fin on the back of it. My auto crimes guy looked it up, and he was on the show a couple of times with us and talked about once you plug that phone in and you connect it to the USB hub, it goes through the phone. It goes through the info. It's not one of those official infotainment systems, but it gets limited data. I wanted to also talk to you about the importance. He drove across country, so 2,600 miles or so. From Washington, from Pullman, straight, took a little detour and then straight across into Monroe County. What kind of data, if you know anything about this stuff, can they pull from the onboard vehicle diagnostic system?
So it's dependent upon the model of car and what's there. Generally, that's going to go to a very specialized team. There are different softwares that law enforcement use where we can download the contents and interpret the contents of anything that's stored on that system. It will have some trip information there, but it varies by model of car. So you might know, like, it drove this many miles and then it stopped, how long the stop was before the car was powered on again. So all that information might be available dependent upon the model of car.
There you go. Bill, you got anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to say something. Someone actually brought this to my attention the other day. This was, I would guess, around the 27th, 28th of December when he was driving across country, because he was arrested on the 30th of December. When you look at that car, you don't see it like packed with personal goods, like a suitcase. Did everything fit in the trunk? Did he intend on going back to Pullman, or was this the trip? He was never going back there because he knew what he did. He lost his job. He lost his PhD program. He lost his apartment. So, of course, they didn't do the warrant yet because he wasn't yet arrested on his apartment in Pullman. But was he intending to go back there? It seems like he probably was, because or else his car would have been loaded with all of his personal goods.
Yeah.
We also don't know yet the complete contents of the car or of the apartment. So there might be multiple other electronics, his computer activity, pieces of evidence that they have that we're not aware of yet because they were fruits of the search warrant.
Exactly. And what confused a lot of people, and also I was looking at this strongly, these murders were committed on the 13th of November. He's driving back over a month later. Why did he feel the need to clean that vehicle out in his parents' driveway, right? And dump out the contents of what he cleaned into his neighbor's trash bin over a month later? Is this part of an OCD thing where he felt like, well, I cleaned it once, I'm going to clean it again? And was this the third or fourth time he cleaned it? We don't know, because of all of the time that he was unapprehended and we didn't know who Bryan Kohberger was until his name came out in late December. So what did he do in all of that time? Was there eyes on him, Bill? Was there surveillance on this guy after the Washington State University campus police officer ran that vehicle and they identified that this is a potential suspect? These are all unknowns, but we will hear about it at trial. That's for sure. I'll tell you
Ron,
that.
I think absolutely once the Washington State Police identified the white Hyundai Elantra as belonging to someone that attended their school, and then the FBI and the Moscow police, the Idaho State Police, did a complete workup on Bryan Kohberger. I call it on my show, I call it the perpology, the study of the perp. Look deeply into his background.
Right.
So you don't want any surprises. You want to know everything about this person before you go looking for him. Friends, relatives, cars he owns, money he has access to, credit cards, all of those things. So when you do have to track him, you don't have to start doing the investigation there. You already have half the investigation done. And I have no doubt that they were on him for at least, once they identified that car, his name came up, and then shortly thereafter, they had the touch DNA on the knife sheath. Right. All, again, circumstantial evidence, all piling high and pointing to one person, Bryan Kohberger.
Yeah, Bill, high and deep with all of the evidence. Washington State University campus police, kudos to that officer on a late tour overnight, running plates randomly, doing what cops do, right? We look into things. So I want to just tip my cap to that Washington State University police officer who took that liberty to start running plates and doing once that bolo came out. I want to go over to the chat and say hello to everybody. Wild Z Pony is in the building. She's saying, perpology, love the Supreme Commander, NYPD Bible. My sister and my brother-in-law are watching from upstate New York. Thank you, sis, for watching and supporting. I didn't see any super chats come in from my sister, but we'll look for that soon. There's so much involved in this case, but I had a couple of questions, and I don't want to get sidetracked because we're into 38 minutes already. Tiffany, could you explain advanced logical and Cellbrite extractions? What do they get and how do you get it done? Would you be able to talk a little bit about that?
So for Cellbrite extractions, there are different extractions available to you based on make and model of the phone. So an advanced logical, we're talking about iPhones. We're going to use the advanced logical for iPhones, and then you could do a file system through there. It's not a full file system like you can get with some specific law enforcement only tools. The advanced logical, as it would apply to like an Android, it gives you certain specific data. And the difference between like the Android and the iPhone is when you're collecting your iPhone, you're collecting the entirety of that Apple iPhone. If you're doing Android, you can pick and choose what you're taking off the phone if you were so inclined.
Okay, so that explains that. And my next question is it easier to extract or get data or work with iPhone as opposed to Android?
It depends on the data that you're trying to extract. There are certain third-party apps that automatically are parsed through Android that aren't for Apple, and vice versa. So it really depends on what specific data you're looking at, and also the level of encryption on the phone, whether you possess the PIN for that phone or not.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that. Also, another question that comes into DutyRon.com, and a lot of people ask this redundantly over and over again: how easy is it to get phone records, and do you match them up to your own extractions once you get them? In other words, people ask me this all the time: do when the phones are brought into the forensic lab and it's done by computer crimes folks, right? Do they match up those records to what they get from AT&T, Verizon, and so forth, Tiffany?
You're always going to cross-check your points. And in some instances, your evidence may not be records from Verizon. It might only be what's on that phone. But you're always going to want to check your dates and times to make sure, too, that anything that you as the examiner are manipulating, you want to make sure that your extraction is set to the right time zone. So you're going to compare it to any of those provider records to make sure everything matches up.
There you go. So it's good. It's good for folks that are asking this question. Hey, you got the answer. It's always great to have that stuff matched up together, because more is better than less. So if you have two statistical pieces of data to look at and they match up and everything all coincides, it's a stronger
Exactly. And if you
presentation.
have a third-party app video, like say a Snapchat video,
Right.
and you have it on the phone and it specifically says a date and time, you're also going to subpoena or serve an order or a CDW to Snapchat, and Snapchat themselves are going to provide you with those records so you can check that your date and time is right. And that also gives you another witness at trial. You have that third-party representative from that company that can come and testify that, yes, these are true and accurate records.
There you have it, folks. There's Wild Z Pony. She says Tiffany is a computer brain of knowledge.
You are very kind.
Some of the ladies checking in with the girl power here tonight. And I always love to have our experts, whether it's a guy or a girl, but I always love to get the information that I don't have my own knowledge of from the experts. So that's what's great about this. I'm going to rapid fire some questions to you. Some of them, some of these 8 or 9 questions we've already answered, but here's one coming from Allie in North Dakota. She says, how accurate is cell phone data and tower pings, tower dumps? Thank you and please.
Well, it depends. Cell phone data, there's a whole world of cell phone data. So it depends on if you're talking about data from the cell provider or like, your service provider, your Verizon, your AT&T, or the data that's on your phone. Data that's on your phone can be manipulated by the user. So those records that come from the service provider based on which towers that phone might have hit off of are fairly accurate, and they will too come and testify to the truth of their records in court. So you have that extra backup when you match up those records that shows, hey, it's not just, everybody thinks the police are dumb sometimes. It's not just like dumb police officer, cyber detective who was able to ascertain this information. We have this tech company that can also come in and say, yes, these are our records. This is what we pulled from our servers. We know that this happened on this date and time.
There you go. Thank you for that. Thank you for answering. And some of the people, like you just said, some people think, oh, well, all police are kind of dumb. But listen, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes and a lot of training and technological advancements that most of the general public don't know about. And when you watch shows like Bones and 48 Hours and all this stuff, people get this false promise of, look, they can solve a case, a really extensive, intertwining case in 60 minutes. How come they can't get this thing done in a reasonable amount of time?
Yeah, and Ron, with 20 minutes of commercials, so it's really only 40 minutes.
Exactly. All right, here's question number 2 from Tony D, Equisearch from Ohio. He says, Ron, can you ask if vehicle and cell data can get a conviction, like in the Bryan Kohberger or Murdoch case? How important is this data?
Tech evidence is so important these days because it's everywhere. Everything you're doing is on your phone, in your car. Can it alone convict him for a murder charge? I would say no, because if we only have, yes, he's in the area, yes, he's liking her photos on Instagram, that's not giving us any sort of, he's actually in that house. There's so many other components. And here it's going to be marrying up the location of him, the location of his vehicle, the location of his phone, where it was pinging with, yes, we have his DNA in this house.
Right.
And I'm sure there's going to be a ton more evidence that comes our way during this trial.
Absolutely.
Ron, can I just ask Tiffany a question? I think I know the answer, but I think it would be interesting for the audience to know this. Would it be almost a checklist thing to check Bryan Kohberger's call detailing against all 4 phones of the victims to see, could he have called them and could they have called him?
I would think that the Moscow police are extensively combing through all of those records to see if there was any kind of connection between these victims and Kohberger, other than, maybe some Instagram voyeurism. Did he know any of them personally? Was he in communication with them? Were they emailing? Were they calling? Did they message on any chat apps? Could they have ever been in the same place where they may have communicated? They're going to be digging into all of that because everyone's going to want to know the why in this case. They're always talking about motive. So is there some other kind of motive? Was he familiar to these people before they became his victims?
Bill, you just robbed Donna of her next question.
I'm sorry, but I thought it was an important question that everyone would want.
I got to read the question anyways. But Maria Hernandez in the chat said, "Could Bryan Kohberger make like false?" I forgot exactly what she asked. I had it highlighted. I hope someone read it. Here it is. Can a person throw off law enforcement by maneuvering data? I thought that was a good question. Thank you, Marie.
So maneuvering is an interesting way to put it. You can attempt to throw off law enforcement by deleting data from your phone, by doing factory resets on the phone. We don't know at this point what was on his phone. We have no idea of all the good evidence that might be on that phone because it wasn't part of the probable cause affidavit. So you can attempt to hide things from law enforcement. Absolutely.
Right. Karen, Moscow PD is not doing all the research. Either the FBI or the Idaho State Crime Lab is doing that. So Moscow PD is small police department. I think it's just a handful of cops. I don't even know if they're into the double digits. But let me read question number 3 and show everyone how Sergeant Bill stole the show. From Donna H. send in, how much info and what kind of what can they collect from Bryan Kohberger's cell? And what about the victims' phones, their tablets, their computers, their Bluetooth speakers and Alexa, etc.? Thank you. Same type of question. Can all of their stuff be, forensically scrubbed to see if there's any type of communication, not only by Kohberger, but maybe by somebody else or some other person that might have been sending them racy messages or threatening messages and so forth?
They are going to analyze every single victim's phone as well in this case, because I would think from the prosecutor's point of view, they would hate to have a detective up on the stand. And if the defense gets its own expert and also has access to these phone extractions, and there's messages, threatening messages, or messages that could be interpreted that way from other people on the victim's phone, they're going to want to know why that wasn't addressed. They're going to want to know if that was run down. Did you follow up on this suspect? And this is such a high profile case. They are going to comb through every one of those phones to see all of the communications. All that data is going to be reviewed.
Yeah. Thank you for answering that. And you know what? Somebody in the chat just said, and there's so many great questions rolling by in the chat, but people are mentioning what the 3 of us spoke about before we went live, is this Instagram revelation that we've been hearing about this since at least over a month and a half now, maybe longer, about a particular account that's alleged to be Bryan Kohberger's reaching out to one or more of these girls and not getting any responses. On Instagram, if you're not following somebody and they want to send you a message, if your account's not private, which these girls' accounts were not private, you could send a message to them, but it goes to held for review. I get dozens of those message requests, right? So it's like a held for review, but it's in message request. You have to physically go and look there. And if you don't look there, they'll stay there for, I don't know, forever. But the bottom line is that this is not old news. This is not breaking news. This is old news. And Banfield, again, was on the air just 15 hours ago. And I'm going to, up against my best wishes, I'm going to play it because I want people to see it. This is unverified information. We don't know if this, in fact, is the case, because if it's not coming out at trial, then we don't know. where this is coming from. This could be from some garbage person that's just trying to make a name for themselves or get 2 seconds of fame. But here we go.
Some additional reporting to add to this tonight. New and unique reporting that News Nation has discovered, and it has to do sources close to the investigation telling us that the person who is featured on Bryan Kohberger's phone, the female victim who was featured on Bryan Kohberger's phone, is the same person that he was reaching out to on social media. And also that the photos were not taken by Bryan Kohberger, they were downloaded off of that victim's Instagram. So he had taken the pictures from that victim's Instagram. And then I also have this reporting that Bryan Kohberger followed both Kaylee and Maddie on Instagram, but Kohberger liked every one of Maddie's photos. Maddie's on the right, her best friend Kaylee's on the left. Kohberger had liked all of Maddie's photos compared to liking just a couple of the ones on Kaylee's account. He followed both, but he liked all of Maddie's, and compared to liking just a couple of them on Kaylee's account. So that may give us a little bit more insight as to potentially who it was that he had downloaded and kept on his phone, which female victim's pictures were on his phone. Thank you for watching.
So Bill, I talked to you about this before we were up, and Tiffany, you know this. The narrative was that Kaylee was, according to her dad, the one who received the most vicious, stabbings, and this was gone over and over. This was before the gag order. The father was with all different news outlets talking about my daughter sustained the most vicious attack here. She was the target, and now they're talking about Maddie. Bill, what's your thoughts on? I know you're friendly with Banfield. You go on her show every once in a while. What's your thoughts on this garbage reporting?
You know, Ron, I don't trust unverified information from a source close to the investigation. That's not like coming from the horse's mouth, which would be from the mouth of the police, where that's the only place it should be coming from if it's allowable information. And we saw even earlier on, when this case first started, they didn't have a cohesive message going out. When the murders first happened, the mayor of Moscow was talking to the press with totally unverified information that got the whole case in trouble. Really, he said this was targeted and specific, and we don't even know to this day where he got that information from. And then other people, then the district attorney started making statements to the press, and then I think they must have all sat down and said the information should come from one source, and that source should be from the Moscow Police Department, and then Chief Fry became the messenger for the police department. So if it wasn't really coming from his lips, then I don't think you could really 100% verify the information. Of course, broadcast stations have their own investigators. They get their own information. They talk to people. And in this instance, persons close to the investigation is not acceptable as verifiable and trustworthy information for most people.
Yeah, I agree. Tiffany, any thoughts on that?
I mean, person close to the investigation could be somebody who works in the building and was hanging out by the water cooler when people might have been loosely talking about something they shouldn't have. And then that information gets greatly exaggerated. We won't know that actual content till that gets presented at trial, or they come out, it gets grossly manipulated in the media, and they come out and make a statement about what evidence is actually there. But I don't see that happening because they're going to need to present that. They are going to want to save all of the good stuff for that trial.
Right. And, it's funny because a lot of the residents of Moscow, Idaho, are infuriated with the news coverage because they want justice. They want whoever, and it's Bryan Kohberger right now, stands innocent until proven guilty. He stands charged with 4 murders and a charge of felony burglary. All of these people that live and go to school in this community, they want to see a successful prosecution. If this prosecution is not successful because of all of these unverified sources and leaks, and or if this helps to, put mud into the waters on the prosecution's case. Listen, it's a fact. The prosecution has an uphill battle always to fight because this thing wasn't handled perfectly. No investigation is done perfectly. Well, Ed Wallace and I, he's a crime scene unit investigator and specialist. We went deep into the handling of the crime scene, and it wasn't done the way that we would have liked to have seen it done. But why give an extra ground ball to a defense attorney? These prosecutors, like I said, the team that's going to be in court are going to have their hands full. And I mean, I think we can all agree on that. And if you are standing in the name of justice, then putting out this bullshit, and I excuse my language. I mean, it just gets my blood boiling when I see and hear this stuff. Again, Bill, I know you're ready. You got something to say. Go ahead.
So, Ron, it is frustrating. It is annoying. It can hurt the case. But on the other hand, like with the NYPD, our Deputy Commissioner of Public Information basically was told to give everything to the press. And that was coming from the very top, from the police commissioner. And we used to get so frustrated, like, why do they need to know this? Why did they put out that we caught the perp by tracking his cell phone? Why did they have to put that out? And then, this was early on before the public knew that we could do this. Why are they giving out the secrets of investigation? Why are they telling him we tracked his credit card? Why are they telling him they had this new thing called Phone Finder? It was new back then.
Right.
Why are we telling that we went right to his apartment? Because we had this new technology called Phone Finder that can track the phone exactly where he is. And, all of these things the NYPD used to release, and we were our own worst enemy. So even though this is frustrating by watching Banfield come up with new, really National Enquirer type information every night, with sources close to the investigation, it's frustrating, but it's freedom of the press, and there's really nothing that can be done about it unless they catch the person close to the investigation. Then he could be arrested, or she, for violating a court order of
contempt of court, correct? Yes. Criminal contempt of court. It's a bullshit misdemeanor, but you still could be charged with it. Iron Range Rube sends in a $20 super chat. Thank you for the support. Can Banfield be arrested? And you just covered this if she doesn't give up her sources. No. Again, Banfield is like a peacock spreading the wings out. She said, we are covered by the freedom of the press. We can say whatever we want. She actually mentions it. I have it clipped, but I'm not going to do this. She says the gag order applies to the prosecutor, the defense attorneys, the investigators, the witnesses, subpoenas, the people that are subpoenaed, but it doesn't affect me. And I watched it in disgust. I was just like, holy shit, she's just doubling down on it. Thank you, Miss Tammy, for the $5 super sticker. And there was a couple others, Kim and Michelle Herbert. Thank you for the super stickers. Much appreciated. Listen, I have a resident that lives in Moscow, Idaho. She is in the chat, and I want her to come on and talk to you guys a little bit about what the feelings are at Ground Zero in Moscow, Idaho. What are the people talking about? She is a customer of the Mad Greek restaurant. She sent me pictures of the inside of that restaurant, which is about as big as my studio that I'm in right now. It's a small little eatery. Again, there was reports that Bryan Kohberger was a regular there, and he went and ordered vegan pizza. That's the only thing that's vegan on that menu is pizza. But she just keeps in touch with me and gives me a real feel for what people are feeling in Moscow, Idaho. And I wanted her to come on. I don't know if she got busy, but I saw her in the chat. So Cindy, if you are available, come on up, and we'd like to let you talk to the audience a little bit before we move on to the Murdoch trial. Anything in addition, Cindy, Tiffany, about the cell data, the any of his computer stuff. Like there's talk when we saw the search warrant being conducted over at the Pullman campus apartment. They took his computer tower from there and so forth. And there's all the listed stuff that they removed from there. What could we be seeing from there, and what could they get from all of his tech?
There's so much that you can pull from that computer. If he's not cleaning up after himself really well, which most people aren't, we'll know what Google searches he conducted, what he searched for on other search engines, the websites he's visiting, the photos that are saved on his computer, what other files he has on his computer. So if he's, online Googling any of these girls, trying to find their other social media, find out where they live, other information about them, there's just so much. Anything you do on that computer, there is a record of.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I can't wait to hear about that when trial commences. I wanted to say hello to my good friend Dee Banks in the chat. She said she sent a whole big thing, was saying how proud she was of you, Tiffany, and all of the knowledge that you have. And it was basically a girl power message. So thank you for that. Thank you for that.
More women in tech. We need them.
Yeah. All right. Our good friend Cindy is in the studio. As soon as she gives me the thumbs up, I'll add her. She is a resident of Moscow, Idaho, a great friend of Crime Time with DutyRon. She gave me the thumbs up. Cindy, thank you so much for joining. Can you hear us? Cindy?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me without an echo?
Absolutely. Yeah. No echo. We can hear you fine. You have an echo?
No, I don't have an echo. I just want to make sure that you don't have an echo.
Thank you. So, yeah. Cindy, if you can, walk the audience here through where you're from and how are the people in Moscow, Idaho feeling about the news coverage and so forth?
So I was born in Binghamton, New York, and I moved out here in 1993. And I lived in Moscow for 20 years. Now I live in Pullman. So I'm really familiar with both areas, and it's really bizarre knowing. I also work for the Washington State University Graduate School, where Bryan Kohberger was a student. So yeah, so I'm really familiar, and I think that it's really unfortunate. I don't think that the people are very happy with the kind of what Bill said, the unverified information. So we were told really early on from Chief Fry, only believe the stuff that comes from law enforcement. And I was incredibly loyal to them. And everything that's come out from them has been verified. And Mad Greek, which People magazine came out saying all this stuff, and the Mad Greek owner came out and said, please stop harassing us. They were going to their door. They were pounding on the, trying to get a hold of them. And then there was a large news outlet that actually contacted Bryan Kohberger's boss in the criminology, CrimJ department, where they were harassing them. And so even though WSU has its own communications unit, and they've been very tight and very close to the vest, just like the Moscow PD. The large news outlet, which I won't divulge, but they were calling the CrimJ boss, harassing them. So, this town has already been devastated enough by just the murders happening, and I feel like what Banfield did recently is clickbait. I don't think it'd be any surprise to think that Kohberger had photos of these young women on his phone, because any one of us right now could go to Instagram or anywhere and just screenshot people. So the fact that they're like, this is brand new news. No, it really isn't. And because of the gag order, I think that some of these news outlets are getting desperate and want information, but we're going to have to wait just like everyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, once I heard the gag order, and then there was a modification to the gag order. I think you and I, Bill, we speak almost every day. When we heard this, we were like, here we go. Buckle yourself in, because it's just going to be a whole bunch of I said the F word, so I had to bleep that one out. I'm my own moderator, but I again, this whole thing of getting the news and making a story. Oh, look at the pup! Getting a story in the name of just ratings and satisfying your advertisers. I don't go for that, because there's real victims, families that are survivors of this, and that have to live the rest of their lives. This is a very important part of the process. You need to be able to get a successful prosecution, and all of this white noise, as I said, is just garbage. I muted your mic because I was hearing an echo in the background.
Ron, if I could just say something, even with some of the families of the victims, specifically Steve Goncalves, and I don't want to criticize him, but they hired an attorney that was more or less their talking head for the family. And early on in the investigation, a lot of the information that Steve Goncalves was privy to, he was in turn telling the news stations about it.
Because they suck it out of you. They probably harassed him to get that out of him too,
But that in turn also hurt the investigation, in my opinion.
I agree.
Well,
I cringed
it
every
hurt
time I
the
heard him on the air.
investigation. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Cindy.
I wanted to say, well, I was just going to say, yeah, it hurt the investigation, but Bill, I mean, we don't know that poor dude. I mean, I know he came out later and apologized because he'd been so critical of the Moscow PD, saying it took so long, which we all know right now it did not take long. But just as somebody who was going through the murder of his daughter, I mean, I don't know. We have to give him a little bit of grace. I see both sides of it. We want a conviction. We want this suspect to, be punished for what he did. But I was really annoyed with Steve at first, but then the more I thought about it, I don't know if any one of us knows what we would be like if our daughter was,
you don't wish this on your worst enemy. You don't wish this on your worst enemy. This is the nightmare of all parents or all humans. So I can't overemphasize the importance of, again, if you have information and you're close to this investigation, just shut your mouth. Don't blab it out to the news. It doesn't need to be put out there. But anyways, I wanted to highlight this comment by Jerry Donaldson. She says, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And that's what Ed said. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. Cindy, I want to thank you for taking the time. We're going to move on to Murdoch and we're going to wrap up because it's over an hour and I promised Tiffany I'd let her go. So
thanks, Tiffany, you're a rock star, and Bill, I watch you all the time. Of course, I love DutyRon. Thanks for having me on. Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
All right. There she goes. All right. Do you guys got 15 more minutes?
Of course we do.
Okay. All right. So today we saw Alec Murdoch take the stand.
Surprisingly.
I was shocked by that. I don't think his attorneys, his team probably cheerleaded him on for that. I think he, because of his background and his narcissistic behavior, he wanted to testify. He wanted to get up there. And I don't think that did any good for him. And I'm sure that there are some criminal defense attorneys that maybe think that it did do good. I can't wait to hear with some of the YouTube criminal defense attorneys. And I got to hear from Joe Murray. But I wanted to get your thoughts on that case, Tiffany. We heard a lot about Cellbrite and all this stuff from OnStar and so forth. How important is Maggie and Paul's cell phone data, that Snapchat video, which I'll queue up as you're talking? How important is this for the jury to see this and the testimony that we saw today?
That Snapchat video may very well be what made them decide to put him on the stand, because his story was, no, I wasn't there at that time. Well, we have you on video there at that time. They're playing this video for the jury. So something has to negate, well, why did he lie about it? And maybe they thought the best approach was have him go up there and say, hey, yeah, I'm a liar. I lie a lot. I suffer from addiction. It causes me to lie. I lied about that, but I'm not lying when I say I didn't kill my family.
Yeah, 100%. Bill, have you been watching that trial? I mean,
You know, I watched some of his testimony today, and I love to repeat this. And the best indication of future behavior is past behavior. And that so applies to Alec Murdoch, because if you're a liar at one time and a perpetual liar, you're going to continue to lie. And I think that the fact that his attorneys decided to put him on the stand is because they're desperate and they know he's getting convicted. And I think this is a desperation move. What else is going to thwart the evidence? There's tremendous evidence against him, scientific evidence, physical evidence, gunshot residue, blood spatter. This video now that it's just,
Yeah.
How is he going to? I still don't believe when he says, "Oh, I was abusing pills for over 20 years," and I don't buy that. And just his whole demeanor. I think he came across as like an angry, mean guy. I really do.
and a lot of people think the prosecution is going over that the prosecutor is going over the top with his financial crimes. And I don't think that they're highlighting his financial crimes to highlight those crimes. They're, like you just said, they're establishing that this guy is a chronic liar. He is a pathological liar. He lies about everything he does, and he blames it on his addiction. That is not going to fly with the jury. It is going to resonate with them that everything and anything he does is around a predicated lie, and he creates stories to fit whatever he's doing at the time. And they talked about him ripping off a teenager of millions of dollars in one of his clients, and he really
Ron, that was the housekeeper fell down the stairs.
The children.
Yeah, and she was awarded, or family was awarded $4 million. He stole that from the family.
All of it.
That's a nice guy, Like if he could do that, could he kill his wife and his son? You bet he could.
Exactly. Let me play this. This is a bit of from Law and Crime, and then we'll talk about some of the data, and then we'll wrap it up. Let's see. This is Paul taking his.
And I work for Snap Incorporated.
What are your duties there?
I'm an law enforcement operations lead. So I assist with and help manage a team of folks who respond to law enforcement legal process. Sure. Our team responds to legal process submitted to our company, subpoenas, search warrants, that kind of thing.
All right. So you're in charge of responding to search warrants or subpoenas from law enforcement or other legal entities?
Correct.
All right. And briefly, please, what is Snapchat?
Snapchat, it's an application that was created by Snap Incorporated to help people express themselves. People can connect to their friends, people they know, and I guess you could consider it a social networking type of application.
Is social media another word that could be used for Snapchat?
Yes.
Does it give the ability for individuals to send each other messages?
Yes.
Does it give the ability for individuals to send each other pictures or videos?
Yes.
And in the normal course of this business, does Snapchat keep records if the user so chooses?
Yes.
What kind of records does Snapchat keep?
Basic subscriber information, content that was sent to and from folks.
So I'm going to go to you, Tiffany, on this. Snapchat is like, just any other social media app. It's going to save photos into like memories and so forth. I don't really use it that much, but I've seen it for some of the younger kids. But a lot of people use it, and apparently his son Paul created a Snapchat video and uploaded it at 8:44 p.m. And that was the video in the kennel. And I'm going to cue that up as you talk. But I think that's what we were all talking about here. Can you tell the audience what that process is for law enforcement to go through to get that data from Snap?
We would have to get an order that is signed by a judge authorizing the release of that information. That goes over to Snapchat. Their legal representatives review it, making sure that everything that they need in order for them to be able to release that information is contained within it. And then they provide that content, if it exists, back to law enforcement. And in this case, we have it in kind of three places. You have this witness, this friend of Paul's, who says, yes, Paul sent me this. I talked to him on the phone. He sent me this video. Then I imagine we have Paul's phone. So we know from Paul's phone that the video is there as well. So that's two places. And then we have Snapchat verifying, yes, we have this video. The date and time is correct.
Yeah, and it's a damning video because on it you can hear Paul talking. The dog has a like a dead bird or something in its mouth, and you can hear his mom and also his dad there. There is an argument that's out there that people are saying, well, because it's audio, how could they wholeheartedly prove that, you know, this was in fact Alec Murdoch there and his wife? We had family, close family, come on and testify, and also some of his colleagues that in fact is the voice of, you know, his wife Maggie and his son. How is that going to hold up with the jury though if they don't actually physically see them?
Well, the jury has that witness testimony, and they're going to determine for themselves whether or not they believe those witnesses to be reliable. But now they're also firsthand hearing his voice testifying in that courtroom.
Yeah.
And that video is being played for them. And when they go back to do their deliberations, they can request to hear that video again.
Absolutely. Bill,
So
any
all it
thoughts?
takes is them to believe that that is his voice on that video.
You're right. And a lot of people miss that part of it. And that's the reason I led you into that. And that was a perfect response. Bill, any thoughts on that?
Well, Ron, again, if this was the only piece of evidence, yeah, we could maybe explain it away. But when it's piled up high and high with other strong pieces of circumstantial evidence, that's what builds a case. And combine that with him testifying and trying to lie about things. And even when you watch his body language, I think Phil Grimaldi just raised in the chat, watch him testify when he's being interviewed by the defense and he's all crying and all tears. And when he's being interviewed by the prosecution, he's defiant.
Yeah.
And he's angry, you know, so it's a whole different demeanor.
What I also noticed is when his defense team was questioning him, he positioned himself looking at the jurors. He scooted his chair to the left. Yeah, to the right if you're looking at the screen, but to his left. And he's facing them and trying to appeal to them because he's an attorney. He knows. But when the prosecution was crossing him, he was looking at the prosecutor and at his defense team. He wasn't even looking at the jury.
Yeah, because he's practiced as an attorney and he's almost trying to be intimidating to the prosecution. Even, of course, that's not going to work, but
Right.
that's his mindset.
I'm going to play a little of the snap video for those of you who might not like to hear this, or, you know, it's the dog with a dead animal in its mouth. They don't show it or anything like that, but I just wanted to give a little bit of a disclaimer there. So this is the news piece on this.
Alec Murdaugh's alibi potentially destroyed by his son's own video.
Get back.
Prosecutors revealing a 58-second cell phone video recorded by Paul Murdoch directly contradicting Alec Murdaugh's story, placing him at the murder scene minutes before his wife and son were shot to death. In the video, you can see Paul going into a pen on the family's property to check on a friend's dog. In the background, you hear other voices.
Hey, he's got a bird in his mouth. Bubba. Damn, Bubba. It's a guinea. This is a chicken. Come here, Bubba. Come here, Cash. Come here, Bubba. Cash.
Oh, yeah, that's him.
Murdoch claimed he didn't go to the family's kennels that night until he found his wife and son's bodies.
I was up at the house. I laid down, took a nap on the couch, probably, I don't know, 25, 30 minutes.
In emotional testimony, close family friend Rogan Gibson
here's
recalling
the
how
friend.
he talked to Paul Murdoch that night about his injured dog. Paul telling him he'd take a video.
Did you hear any other voices when you were on the phone with Paul about 8:40?
I did.
And what voices did you hear?
I heard Miss Maggie,
And who else did you hear?
and I thought it was Mr. Alec that I heard.
Cell phone records show Paul took that video right after that call. Minutes later, he and his mother were dead.
Did you ever get that video?
I did not.
Police later showed Gibson that video from inside the kennel.
And what voices did you hear?
Paul's, Miss Maggie, Miss Elliott.
And how sure are you now?
Positive.
100%?
That's correct.
Prosecutors playing that video for him again in court.
Can you point out Alec Murdoch, the person whose voice you recognize in this video in this courtroom, please?
Sitting right there in the gray jacket.
But the defense pushing back, painting a portrait of a happy family.
And they were loving to each other and to Paul and Buster and their friends, correct?
That's correct.
And can you think of any circumstance that you can envision, knowing them as you do, where Alec would brutally murder Paul and Maggie?
Not that I can think of.
And a cell phone expert testified that Alec Murdaugh's call logs leading up to the murders are missing. He said it appeared Murdoch deleted that data.
Let's talk about that just for a second, and we'll get ready to wrap up. Murdoch allegedly here deleted data purposefully. That's not recoverable. I thought, and I could be wrong, I thought that even when you do delete data, that there could be a chance for them to recover it.
There are times when you can delete, especially on Apple devices, where you can permanently delete that data, and dependent on the software that's used to try and recover that, you may not get that back. You may see there's a gap though. And what likely happened here is the investigator is looking and he's like, okay, I'm missing a point in time on this phone. Either the entirety of his call logs were gone, and they were able to just get call logs from the service provider. So they know this phone number called this phone number at this time, because they later talk about him calling his wife cell phone and texting his wife.
Right. And they had the Find My iPhone app open for all of them, and they shared their usernames and passwords and so forth. At least he and his wife, they were able to get into each other's phones. And I think the overwhelming amount of evidence that they have here is, and there's many people that are split on this, but I think more people feel that they're going to come back with a guilty verdict than people feel it's going to be a hung jury or a not guilty. But we'll see what happens. I mean, again, it's up in the air, and nobody knows what the jury's thinking. Bill, any thoughts on this?
Look, I just see his demeanor. I think that it shows that the defense is panicking for the fact that they put him on the stand. You almost never see a homicide defendant go on the stand unless they force their hand with their attorneys. And could he have done that? Possibly, but I think they would have probably advised him not to testify unless they felt it was hopeless. And maybe this was it was the Hail Mary pass.
Right.
Eventually,
Yeah. Tiffany, one
Juries are
last thing.
unpredictable. They're hoping that somebody on that jury believes those tears, believes that this is a man who loved his family and would never, ever do something like that.
They're doing the best that they can to paint this guy out to be a choir boy, but he's anything but that. Again, he by him going on the stand, I think that was his undoing. And that's my own opinion. And opinions, everyone's got one. I wanted to ask you before I let you go, and I promise this is the last thing. The GMC, the OnStar, right? They talked about encryption, and I never heard this mentioned in, like I have Blue Link with Hyundai, but I also have, like, Mazda has their own server. Like, all the companies have their own thing. So GMC OnStar has been around forever, and they made it sound like it was a big deal for the FBI to run a program to get what they called keys. I think, am I saying that right?
The encryption keys.
Yeah. Can you talk about that for the audience? Because a lot of people are held up on that.
So all of this data is proprietary to the company that creates it. Everybody has their own system, their own programming. They want to keep it that way. So that data is encrypted. There's not always a way to decrypt that data readily available. Not every car is compatible with the software that's available to law enforcement. And sometimes it requires putting that drive either back together because of damage, or decrypting it and putting it in a format that's readable by what is available. So a lot of times you have to work with the company
Right.
to get that
Yeah.
information.
And it took them a year to write that key to decode that encryption. And that was one of the things that the defense was saying, is that you just sprung this on us now. But it took, according to the FBI special agent, a whole year to develop the program to encrypt, to decode the encryption in that GMC. And we heard a lot of things about Alec Murdoch wearing that badge, the badge of the prosecutor, and how he used it when he went to the hospital and so forth. So he does a lot of this sneaky stuff. Could there have been a way that he had that encrypted on his own? I don't see that. Somebody sent me a message
that would
about
have just been because of the proprietary information
Right.
that the company applies to that device.
Excellent. Well, we spent an hour and 25 minutes. Tiffany, will you promise to come back another time and see us? Because we had over 1,500 people in the live chat, and everyone's loving your presence and your knowledge, Tiffany. So guys in the chat, if you're not yet subscribed to Crime Time with DutyRon, please subscribe, hit the thumbs up and the notification bell. Follow me and Ed on all things social media, one word, DutyRon. That's Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and yes, we are on TikTok. We don't swing from poles on TikTok. We upload our videos from the crime channel. So it's not anything that you would think. Also, my good friend Bill Cannon here from Police Off the Cuff. I will link his channel in the description. He's one of my suggested channels. He's been a great friend of Crime Time with DutyRon. I consider Bill a friend, and he was a model citizen tonight with our guests. Thank God.
I pulled it back a little bit tonight.
I put him on double secret probation. And tonight was the test, and if he,
Right, I was on
failed the
probation
test,
tonight.
he would get the old.
Oh, hell no.
And
Pardon my French, but you're an asshole.
So thank you, Tiffany, for spending an hour and 25 minutes with us on a weeknight.
Thank you for having me.
I know you're a mom and everything like that. Where can everybody find you? Is it just LinkedIn? Do you have any other social media, or do you do anything live streaming wise, or is this the first one for you?
This is my first one because I am a mom and I am traumatized by my former career. So I do keep all of my social media private, not a big streamer, but I am on LinkedIn, so you can connect with me on there.
I will link her LinkedIn. That's a tongue twister. I will link her LinkedIn down below in the description with her permission. You guys can go over there and follow her on LinkedIn. And we plan to have her back on some of these cases that we cover. And it was an honor and a pleasure to have you. You're a gem. I appreciate you. Bill, thank you for taking out the time. And again, to our live chatters and our replay viewers and the folks who leave super thanks. Super thanks is an option to, when you watch our channel on the replay, you could leave like a super chat at in the live replay. So thank you to the super chatters and the super thankers. We, Ed and I, and all of my guests and everybody here appreciate you. If you're not yet either a subscriber or a member, consider becoming a member. And we do have a Patreon. You can always go over to Patreon. We do a lot of Patreon exclusive and member exclusive live streams. So check us out over there. And again, as I always say on all of these lives, God bless the world. God bless the United States of America. And God bless each and every one of us here in the chat, but especially these victims and their families. We send strength, prayers, and positive vibes to all of these folks, because as I said, they are the ones who have to live with these horrors for the rest of their lives. So I'm hoping for a successful prosecution in a Murdaugh case and with Kohberger and all of these cases that we cover. Thank you on behalf of Crime Time with DutyRon, Bill, Tiffany. I'll see you guys soon. Good night from New York.
Good night, all.
Good night, everyone.